Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Path to the Pros Season 2. For those just tuning in, this is a podcast series where I sit down with some of the most talented and successful execs in sports and entertainment, learning about their journey so far, the path to success, as well as career-related industry topics as well. Today, I'm sat with Chad Cardinal, the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Operations with the Aspire Group. Chad, thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Samir. Appreciate what you're doing to the podcast and eager for the opportunity to visit.
Good stuff, man. So kicking off with a question I always like to get these things kicked off with. Take us back to the earlier part of your career, Chad. For those listening, give us the journey of how you've got to where you are today.
Very good. Yeah. Gosh, it's almost 20 years in now. My first job was my high school or my college athletic department. So I was holding cords for the radio department as we were broadcasting the game over the air.
Wow.
And setting up the field afterward, or setting up the field before and tearing it down afterwards. And then the summers, I got an internship with minor league baseball team about 2 hours where I'm from in Minneapolis. So that was kind of my start in sport in my college years. And through those good experiences, I studied sport management and exercise science. Once I graduated, I was lucky enough to find a job in my hometown of Minneapolis, Minnesota, as an entry-level part-time salesperson for the Minnesota Timberwolves and Lynx, so the NBA and WNBA. And so I spent about 4 years in that role as an individual performer. I was exposed to a lot of different areas of the business and stayed on the revenue path for 8-9 years in leadership thereafter. And then the last 7 or 8, I've been on the agency side of things with kind of a broad perspective of revenue and partnership based, but also exposure and oversight of strategy, analytics, and marketing as well. But it all started back holding cords as a radio intern for my college athletic department.
Nice. The dream start, right? I think if you get that opportunity at college, it kind of sets you up for the rest of your career from there. And talk us through that journey, because you've obviously worked with some amazing properties over the years. You've obviously got the Bruins, the Timberwolves, Sporting Kansas City, some pretty big names out there. Just talk to us through that kind of career path, how each opportunity kind of presented itself, and whether there was, I guess, a conscious effort throughout any of that led you to any of those opportunities.
The conscious effort, probably not so much early on in my career. It was just naive and wasn't thinking more than a week at a time. Now I probably think in decades and years as it relates to my career. I'm comfortable delaying gratification a lot more now in my upper 30s than I was probably in my early 20s. But yeah, so I spent about 4 years with the Timberwolves and Lynx, and our senior director on the Wolves side of things joined the MLS League office. And I had a good relationship with him, and we kept in touch. And he was head of club services, and he came to me one day and said, "There's an opportunity. There's 3 entry-level manager positions in Major League Soccer. Would you be interested in exploring any of them?" I thought management was what was next for me, just because the energy I got from training young reps or celebrating their successes, it felt like management was the path for me. And long story short, I had the opportunity to interview for those 3 jobs and was fortunate enough to land in Kansas City, and had a great couple of years there. Experienced 2 different cultures, under 2 different leaderships, 2 different brands. We were Kansas City Wizards originally, playing at Community America Ballpark, which is a minor league baseball stadium, and now it's awesome to see what it's become. Unbelievable sellout streaks, great sales culture, producing great people. I was actually referred to the Boston Bruins from a sales trainer we had at Sporting KC. He recommended me. His name's Charlie Cheslagi, a famous sales trainer in America here. He recommended me to the Boston Bruins, and that was an opportunity to oversee ticket sales for the hockey team, and then the arena side of things, so the TD Garden. So tennis, gymnastics, circus, Disney on Ice, UFC, we kind of did it all. And then I was fortunate my last 2 years to earn the responsibility to do Celtics Premium as well. So we were lucky. We had our plates full, but it was a great place to be in. Boston was a sports town. I never took for granted how great it was to be there. And then about 8 years ago, I got a call from the Aspire Group to help build the West Coast through the fan relationship management division, which is ticket sales, sponsorship, donation. I had known the company leadership informally through my NBA days. And I kept an eye on them from a distance, and was pretty aware of their brand and how they went about their business and how people talk about them. So I was eager at the right opportunity to join the Aspire group, and over the last 8 years, been lucky enough to earn additional responsibilities and join our HQ staff here today. So now we're fired up to be Play Fly Aspire employees, and we really like what we can offer, and we really like what how we can do it too.
Nice. I think that last component there that you just mentioned, what has it been like joining a business like the Aspire Group? A sales director, you'd obviously done a good job and had the relevant experience to get there, but then working your way up all the way through to an SVP, part of the leadership team, and then ultimately going through, the recent event with Playfly. How's that been for you? And, just kind of talk us through that journey in an articulate way, but at the same time, we'd love to learn a little more.
Yeah, happily. Thanks for asking. I mean, I think part one of your question, I mean, what really opened my eyes to business was I went to business school. So my boss, as part of my annual performance review, recommended that I get an MBA. He did it, and I could see it directly from him how much he was improving almost week to week by it. And that was really inspiring to me. And I'd been thinking about business school for years, but getting from 0% to 98% was pretty easy. Getting 99 to 100% was difficult. But he got me there through his example, and then what I was, experiencing and seeing from him. So going to business school, I realized, hey, I can be really interested in things that are non-revenue. I'm interested in what the strategy works. What's the analytics piece? How does the brand affect what we're doing? So that created great exposure to me because I was the only revenue person in my cohort. Everybody else, I went to Pepperdine, so our campus was in the Silicon Valley. It was a lot of tech. There was people from Instagram and Facebook. There was hospitality there. There's a lot of healthcare as well, but I was the only revenue person. So it was the first time in a long time, being the minority in the room in terms of my skill set. Yeah. So that really broadened me out. And luckily, the Aspire Group cares enough about people to be thinking about what's next in their career before they are. So they exposed me to a lot of different pieces of the business. So lucky for me, I'm spending probably 2/3 of my time on revenue sides of the commercial aspects, and probably 1/3 of it on back of office stuff that supports the commercial side of things. In terms of the recent acquisition, I mean, we are so happy for our founder, Dr. Bernie Mullen, and what he built. I mean, we were named the best company to work for 3 times, and that's in his example. And going back to business school, a lot of the things that they taught us about organizational development, I already knew through my training with Bernie, which was really kind of satisfying to me. But yeah, on May 2nd, we closed the deal with Playfly Sports to join them. Great company. We've had lots of fun, a lot of learning, a lot of talent that's doing a lot of cool things, a really unique value proposition that we're excited to hit the marketplace with, both on the professional and the collegiate and even the high school level. So that's been fun. We're only 10 weeks in, so there's a lot of learning. But those that are palms up and lean into the learning are really thriving. So it's been a lot of new, fun, good experiences, and I can't wait to see what it's gonna look like a year from now.
Yeah, no doubt. I'd love to hear that, man. Like I said, it's aspirational for me to be able to speak with people like yourself who are really living proof of kind of owning their own professional development and not letting it kind of be dictated by others. I think there's certainly a play in having that support, having that leadership around you that can help guide you and help you get to where you want to get to, maybe before you even think that you're ready, right? I think that's a huge part of development is throwing yourself in the deep end and learning to swim rather than kind of slowly paddling your way to get there. I think it's something that a lot of other people will be thinking about and can be and should be thinking about, as well as how do they really kind of own that professional development piece, and what are the kind of things that they need to do to get there. So a question for you, Chad: how do you think that, I guess, people similar to yourself or other individuals in the industry can identify those career goals and aspirations to help guide their own professional development journey?
Yeah, great question. I'm so glad you brought it up. I mean, I think the thought that comes to my mind is that people expect too much of their employer as it relates to professional development, and they don't expect enough of themselves as it relates to their professional development. So own your professional development. I think if there's one thing I'd like people to learn from this conversation is own your professional development. Anything you get from your manager or your company, consider gravy. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily I need to go spend 6 figures and get an MBA from an Ivy League school. That can be, hey, I'm spending 20 minutes a night studying my craft, listening to a podcast like this. I'm driving home, instead of listening to sports radio, I'm listening to Samir's podcast because I know that that's developing me. That could be, hey, I'm out at a restaurant and I'm studying the waiter or waitress and understanding what he or she does service-wise that I can then take back when I'm working games and events. So it's not inconveniencing yourself, but it's being intentional about yourself. And I think the biggest separator that compounds throughout years, Samir, is the people who put that 5 to 15 minutes in themselves day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. When they're in their 10, 12, 15 years in their career, they are lapping people that are not doing that. It's like interest, it just absolutely compounds. So my encouragement to people is own your professional development. That means different things to different people. That means different things as you get exposure to different things, and be grateful for anything you get from your company. Consider that added value.
Love that.
It's just your personal professional development is too important to outsource.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I can speak to that very, very clearly, Chad. There's, recent thing for me in terms of, I'm always doing different things and how can I better myself in everything that I'm doing, and as everyone should be doing. And it's funny that you mentioned the example of, listening to a podcast when you're on your drive home or your commute home. And one thing that I've always been, I don't say bad with, but I love listening to music, right? So if I'm on the way to work, on the way from work, I'm listening to a new album, I'm listening to my favorite artists, new mix, whatever it might be. And something that I've recently realized is a lot of the time I'm just cycling through the same songs. Half of the time I'm barely even listening to the music. I'm on my phone, I'm catching up on emails, I'm, catching up on messages. And recently I've started listening to the SBJ Abe Madcore podcast, Sports
Buzzcast.
Buzzcast, that's the one, yeah. So started listening to that every morning, and the little things that you then pick up from that kind of help you in your day to day. You've got industry topics that you can be speaking about, and that's just one small example of something that has helped me to kind of professionally develop myself, and something that hasn't come from my boss, hasn't been dictated to me. It's something that you just kind of make that conscious decision, as you said, to get there. I think
part of your greatness. I mean, the thing I found too about like listening to audiobooks or podcasts is when I do listen to music, it sounds so much sweeter.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. You almost take it for granted a little, right? Because you listen to the same songs all the time, so that when you hear them, there's nothing as exciting about maybe when you heard it the first few times. But I think the biggest thing that, at least in my opinion, that a lot of people will come across is, naturally there are a lot of obstacles, right? There are setbacks, life happens sometimes, and when these things do take place, it's difficult to kind of find yourself back on the road. How do you, in your opinion, stay motivated and resilient during some of those challenging times that may put you off track slightly?
Yeah, I mean, life is hard. Life is a team sport. It's better with it for sure. But inevitably, in a 40-year career, bad things are going to happen to you.
Right.
You're going to get unexpectedly or unknowingly let go from a job, and get blindsided. It happened to me, and it's how it works. That's life sometimes. Yeah. What I would say is this: is a lot of times when we're disappointed or flustered, it's because things don't meet our expectations. I think it's great to have really high expectations of yourself and have manageable expectations of others. And I've developed that philosophy through, I like to work quick. I like to work fast. I like to be responsive. I like to read an email once and get it and respond to it. What I've learned is if I get an email once and I don't respond immediately, and I think about it for 2 or 3 or 4 hours, my response is usually different as I give myself more space. I'm going, oh, that's why they're asking that question. Or it's in the back of my mind. I'm going, this, in addition to the question behind the question is this, that sort of thing.
Right.
But speaking to resilience, I think it's just one thing that helps me is my personal board of directors. That's one thing the MBA class said is build yourself a personal board of directors, no differently than a publicly held company. Bob Iger's got a board that he needs to manage. I've got a board that I need to manage. People that don't look like me in terms of ethnicity, location of living, beliefs, skill sets, etc. But I found that speaking to people who care about me as a person can provide me thoughtful feedback that's useful to me. So if I'm complaining about something, very rarely will one of those people join in and say, yeah, you know what, Samir is a jerk. He's not doing his job or whatever. They'll say, how could you communicate in a way that Samir would understand?
Yeah.
So they provide thoughtful questions that put the responsibility in my hands.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, again, the challenges are what makes life fun. No life is perfect by any means. But my mantra kind of tattooed on my chest, not literally, but tattooed on my chest from my manager is control what you can control.
Yeah.
And so I've quickly learned by reporting to him for the last 8 years that focusing on things we can't control is just a waste of energy.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. You spoke a little earlier in the conversation, Chad, around a mentor of yours or a coach of yours who had recommended obviously going to business school, and you've seen the immediate impact as to what that's done with your role now and how that's unlocked new responsibilities for you as a result of that work. What role do you think mentorship, I guess, in a general world, plays in owning your professional development? Because I completely agree you should own it yourself, but I think seeking guidance from those that have been there and done that will only help you get there quicker, right?
Or have clarity, or more enjoyable too. Speed doesn't always matter. And I think a lot of times that's kind of the lure of LinkedIn, is that speed does matter. And the people who can manage the ego and not worry about what it looks like on LinkedIn seem to be happy and fulfilled. So I would say is this, my biggest question with mentorship is when people come to me and say, Chad, I don't have a mentor. I can't, I need a mentor. That's why I'm not getting promoted. And my return served to them always is this: why aren't you worth mentoring?
Right.
People love to mentor. People love to help. So I always turn it back and say, what are you doing that's preventing people from wanting to mentor you? Are you not communicating back? Are you not ethical and moral that's provided? Are you not meeting them in a time that's convenient for them? Is your feedback not too persistent? That sort of thing. But people want to mentor, people want to help. I think the mentees a lot of times need to own the responsibility of finding the right cadence, and the appropriate modality of doing it. One thing I love too is about mentorship is I think a lot of times people think mentors are the people who you call every week or every month and spend time with. Sometimes a mentor can just be somebody you meet one time that gives you a piece of advice that changes everything. So I think a lot of times there's everyday mentors. People you sit next to in the airplane, can be a mentor even for an hour, that sort of thing. So I guess I'd say mentorship makes things better and faster sometimes, but more likely enjoyable. Be worth mentoring, and then realize that mentorship can come in all forms.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I've never really thought about it in that way. In the sense that people have this idea of a mentor, and it's someone that you go to, as you said, when you need advice or you need guidance. So just having that piece of advice that maybe resonates and sticks with you for a while is a form of mentorship.
Well, and I think this too, Samir, is that there's mentoring and there's role models, right? Somebody can listen to your podcast and you can serve as a role model for them, and they can never even know you, right? Because they know you through hours of interaction and your online persona. I mean, I love what you post on LinkedIn. It's so helpful for our industry as a whole. You're a role model for people who don't know you, So I think a lot of times when people are working to find mentors, they can also do themselves a favor and find role models. Role models are people we would like to emulate or aspire to do in our own way, but we don't necessarily need to have a two-way relationship with them.
Right. Spot on. I think there's also that piece of, you speak about a lot of it coming from the mentee. I think there's that piece of understanding that no matter how great of a person or a professional that you are, no matter how successful you've been, having that mindset and the approach to always wanting to develop and always wanting to challenge yourself. What can I be doing better? Okay, great. I've smashed my quota last year. I hit 200% of my target. That can very easily get to a lot of people's heads. And you've probably seen it. I'm sure you've seen it over the course of your career where
I've experienced it. I'm guilty.
It happens to all of us, right? It happens to all of us. You have a great moment, or you close this great deal and you've broken this record, and it happens so often. that it's so important to then at times, rein yourself in, bring yourself back to, okay, well, what were the steps I took to actually get here? And am I currently implementing those steps to get me to the next level? Or am I just resting on the success that I've recently achieved? So, I completely agree with you in the sense that it's got to come from the mentee rather than expecting that guidance to come from somewhere else or someone else.
Mhm.
Another, I guess, just a recent thing, I say recent thing, last few years, we've all seen a big change in the way that we work and, a huge rise of remote work, not just since COVID, but, in the few years before that. It's introduced digital collaboration, it's introduced new ways of learning and working. It's almost strange these days if a business doesn't have or offer some sort of remote working in today's market. How do you think that has impacted the landscape of professional development, and whether that be creating positive opportunities or more challenges? Would love to get your thoughts.
Well, I think one of the biggest advantages from having a hybrid culture or work from home culture is save time on transportation,
Right.
transport. So I think, I've known some people who don't work from home, but still take a half-hour walk and they're listening to podcasts, or they're repurposing that time and speaking with a mentor, reading a book, or printing off LinkedIn articles and reading them, that sort of thing. So I think,
Yeah.
I think one thing that, our COO, Craig Sloan at Playfly said is, he took a different perspective when, our company's a hybrid culture. So 3 days in the office, 2 days remote. As he said, he took a different philosophy, and he said, we feel so passionate about having people in the office, at least part-time. That's our fiduciary responsibility to
Right.
entry-level employees, so you can see a role model. You can see somebody who's had 20 years of experience. You can develop a relationship with somebody you normally would not have over a water cooler, over a lunch, over a meeting, over a hallway conversation.
Yeah.
So I mean, his point was basically that the professional development happens better when there's some in-person work. But in terms of a landscape, you're right. I mean, as we talk to entry-level individual performers, one of the first questions they ask is, is there a work from home option, or what's the policy on that?
Yeah.
I think one thing that we've seen too is that people that are in relationship building roles, so a lot of times revenue generators, prefer at least a hybrid or at least a full-time option to work from home. Whereas those who support those who generate revenue, and finance, HR roles, etc., much prefer the opportunity to work from home because their job can dictate it. So it's interesting. I'm impressed with how the sports industry has changed. I remember reading an article, and actually in Sports Business Journal, there's a gentleman from SeatGeek who was a longtime executive in the NBA. He it was like 2014 or something like that. He became a Sports Business Journal 40 under 40, and one of the questions was, what's one thing the sports industry needs to do a better job of? And this was 2014, I believe. He said, be as good as the tech world is in working from home or hybrid working environments. And so he was 8 years ahead of all of us,
Yeah.
But
He saw
the
it
point
coming.
was, um, it's important to evolve as the landscape changes, and those who lean in to change the best reap the most benefits.
Right. Right. Chad, any final words of wisdom or advice that maybe you'd be looking to offer to those that are really looking to take charge of their professional development, are trying to give themselves a more conscious effort of doing better for themselves?
I think the parting shot I'll have is this: is that as it relates to your career and as it relates to professional development, having a flourishing personal life is good for your career and good for your professional development. So don't forget how impactful your happiness outside the four walls of the office impacts what you get to do in our beautiful industry here. So in addition to owning your professional development, I'd say own having your personal life be flourishing as well. Your career and your development will thank you.
Couldn't agree more, man. Couldn't agree more. A happier person means a happier work life as well. So, Chad, it's been a pleasure. I think for anyone listening, there's no doubt there are tons and tons of advice and guidance that people can take from this. Like I said, man, it's been a pleasure having you on. For those who are looking to maybe learn a little more from Chad, from knowing him personally, he's a great guy and someone who's always open to networking and building relationships, whether that be personal or professional. So I'm sure he'll have no issues with people reaching out. And yeah, like I said, man, it's been a pleasure having you on.
Thanks for carrying me this last half hour. I appreciate you.
No problem at all. Thanks everyone for listening. Tune in next week for the next episode.